Constriction by Richard L. Elsliger. Bruce Watson passed that gas station at least twice a day, once on the way to work and once on the way home. The station, built on the edge of an isolated two-lane ribbon of road, was an old one with architecture suggestive of a thing out of the 1950s. The pump had endured several upgrades over the decades of its existence, and other attempts to modernize the station occurred under the guise of neon lighting and digital signs. That had been more than 10 years ago. The place closed when the economy crashed, and now the gas station served as a bitter reminder of booms and busts, successes and failures, a reminder that everything in this universe proved transitory, and nothing lasted forever, not even a gas station. Every day he passed the station, it reminded him of his own monumental failures, a string of disasters that were his life, an unwritten record he carried inside him everywhere he went, unable to extricate himself from bitter truths as he learned them in key points of his life. His successes, both professional and personal, were numerically insignificant, and he focused more on the failures than those precious few successes. Neither his personal nor his professional life could he synchronize to have them run in parallel harmony. If his personal life succeeded, then his professional life failed. If his professional life succeeded, then his personal life went spiraling into a decaying orbit of decline, burn-up, and bitter ruination. The fact that his current economic reality of a low wage, combined with high inflation, fueled the fact that he hated his life. He hated the objective cruelty of his life, that no one and nothing cared what happened to him, either in the world in which he existed, and more than likely the world of the afterlife, a vast and persistent riddle unanswered in Bruce Watson's mind. He never won a prize, never received an award or so much as an accolade, nary a compliment for anything he ever did, or friendly reassurance from anyone he ever knew. He watched gas prices skyrocket, and though he espoused an environmentally friendly heart within the confines of his chest, he maintained a thirsty V8 as his daily driver. He wanted a more economical vehicle, but had no money to buy one. Selling the old thirsty V8 would not get him the money he needed for a trade-in on a smaller compact. Though his car functioned, it had no market value, having depreciated itself into oblivion. Ideally, he coveted an electric car, a sleek EV that appealed to his concern for the environment. Maybe one day. He grimaced in pain at every fill-up, and he felt the financial pangs in his wallet. He preferred to pay cash, but with the weakened economy and a severe salary cut by his employer, he fell into the trap of buying on credit, gambling that the economy might repair itself in time, and he would get a promotion to dig his way out. It was a late Tuesday night when he found himself again driving the isolated stretch of road from work. No headlights approached, and none followed, allowing a brief reprieve from tailgaters and high-beam blinders. He was nearly upon the station again when a light came on, a digital beacon with a gas price he could not believe. The display screamed out a ridiculous cost per gallon, a ludicrous price less than half of any competitor, both near and far. He gave a cursory glance at his gas gauge and swung into the station grounds, astounded that after 10 years it was now open. Finally, a break in the clouds of misfortune, a respite from the constant bombardments and setbacks in his life. At last, a small but welcome reward with a full tank of gasoline at half the price. Bruce Watson cracked a smile, resolved to treat himself to some fast food once he filled up. Such small rewards kept his internal motor running just fast enough to perpetuate his existence with the ever-constant hope for a better life someday. He drove over smooth pavement and rolled to a stop next to a suitable pump. He readied his wallet to offer good tidings in exchange for a bountiful harvest of that aromatic nectar bestowed from above by the god of combustion and to the goddess of speed. From his vantage point, he saw lights shining inside the station store. Once he filled up his tank, he would conduct a cursory excursion to the old store and step into the past, if but for a brief moment of time, and buy some gas station food. Bruce exited his vehicle and walked to the pump. He savored the moment, looking at the absurdly low price, then picked up a windshield squeegee from the bucket, soaked it in fresh washer fluid, and dragged the soft end along his window. A soapy lather foamed and thickened over the glass, and he adeptly flipped the handle, pulling away the smashed carcasses of accumulated insects. He checked periodically for movement within the station, and thought he saw someone or something for the briefest of instants. He redirected his efforts to finishing the windshield. Upon completion, the glass sparkled like a showroom car. A small swell of pride infiltrated his chest and induced him to make this stop count as a full-service encounter, so he popped the hood and checked the oil. A golden light coating dripped from the tip of the dipstick, and satisfied, he plunged it back into its receptor and closed the hood. Done with the full-service drill, he went directly to the pump and inserted his credit card. It scanned and read the card, and he removed the pump nozzle, stuffing the metal pipe into the opened gas cap of his car. He squeezed and felt a small jolt of pressure in the handle, indicative of the free flow of gasoline through the nozzle. He grappled with the overhanging hose, abnormally unwieldy for a gas pump and cumbersome in design. He fought with the hose and noted its material seemed unfamiliar to his touch. He rested the length of excess hose over his shoulder. He felt something move. The hose descended over him and coiled itself around his arms in a rapid motion, pinning them to his torso. The hose tightened. He let go of the nozzle by instinct, the drive for self-preservation ever present even with such a miserable life. His reaction proved too little, too late. The hose pulled him away from his car and lifted him in the air, his feet leaving the comfort of solid ground. The hose squeezed his body with the strength of an anaconda, and he struggled to breathe. With each subtle exhale from his lungs, the hose constricted ever tighter. His heart pounded in his chest, thumped wildly to pump blood through constricting blood vessels, the thing trying to induce a catastrophic coronary failure. His legs flailed in a useless gesture, and his hands contorted in painful ways to grasp the hose, thinking it might release him, but the hose twisted and encircled him with more of its coils, some of them finding their way around his neck. His mouth gaped open like a fish on dry land, fighting a losing battle to bring needed air to his lungs. The ground beneath him opened into a trumpet-shaped vortex of twisting mist, a churning cloud of the unknown that spun counterclockwise. Inside the cloud, darker matter formed in unrecognizable and seemingly high, malleable swirls of fury, material of a most unstable nature, the likes of which both electrified and terrified every atom in Bruce Watson's body. The monstrous hose flipped him upside down and held him over the vortex. In a spontaneous and merciful gesture, the hose loosened its deathly grip, letting Bruce Watson breathe again, but also letting him plunge into a brilliant silver light coming from the dark depths below. The hole swallowed him and the vortex subsided. The land closed up without a trace and returned to its solid state of concrete and overgrown weeds. The hose retracted and tightened, and the handle found its resting place in the cradle. Bruce Watson's car dissolved into the night air, atomized into its constituent protons, neutrons, and electrons, returned to its most rudimentary state of being, the premise of all matter. The lights to the station flickered off, and the neon digital sign that proudly displayed the outrageous price drop went out with a popping hiss. The shroud of gloom once more descended upon the station and left no trace that Bruce Watson had ever been, or in fact had ever lived. Bruce landed in a cushion of soft jelly deep beneath the station grounds. He attempted to stand, but the shivery substance encased his legs, trapping him firm. When he pushed off with his hands, they too became entangled in the viscous, gelatinous goo. He struggled some and then relented to catch his breath and his sanity. Something profound had just happened, and his mind raced to make sense of these new and unsolicited surroundings. He squinted from the intensity of the silvery light that bathed him in its unearthly glow. Standing in the glow were several forms of living entities. They drew nearer, and Bruce stared with fascination. "Am I dead?" he asked them, to which he received no answer. "Who are you?" he demanded. One of the beings moved toward him and extended a glass wand. It touched the wand to Bruce Watson's forehead, and what followed in his brain was immediate and skull-crushing. Unquantifiable pain transmitted like flashes of lightning through every neuron of his brain, debilitating him. disabling and paralyzing his higher centers of thinking. His eyes rolled up and he fell back into the viscous jelly, unconscious. The slimy entrapment dissolved and the beings extracted him to another area for holding. When he reawakened, his limbs were affixed by an invisible force that pinned him to a cold wall. He tried to move his arms and legs, but they remained numb, unresponsive. The after effects of his headache were manifesting now, and he let out a groan. A pair of beings walked through an energy field at the other end of the holding pen. Bruce shuddered in disbelief at the fiery orange energy field and the beings that emerged from it, defying all that he knew of the universe. Yet there they stood with elongated bodies the size of malnourished children. His eyes adjusted to the low-level lighting, an unusual hue of purple that irradiated the area. One of the beings pointed at the other and appeared to be instructing the other to retrieve something from a standalone pedestal in the middle of the floor. The things looked almost human. Almost. They were possessed of 4 appendages and impassive facial features. A third being came through the energy field, and this one was missing a limb. It followed the other to the pedestal, and a tray materialized with a puff of steam as it opened. They removed an object from the tray, and all eyes trained on Bruce. They moved with deliberation, the 3 converging to a point where he remained pinned like a butterfly in a display case. He saw their eyes, large, lifeless, and reptilian, with vertical pupils, indicative of a species adapted to low-level light, adapted for the blackness of space travel and possible predation by night on their home planet. Drab gray skin cloaked their flimsy bodies and showed in small reveals between the metallic patchwork of their silvery and gold uniforms. Each had a special but indecipherable symbol on the uniform suggestive of rank. Ripples of fear ran through Bruce with no option but to endure their convergence upon him. The object came into view under the low lights, a long glass tube. He began to tell himself stories, that this was sleep paralysis that he'd read about some time ago, that it would all end abruptly and he would rise from his bed and it would be morning and time for work. Bruce told himself another story, that these were astral projections from beyond the grave, a series of hallucinations generated from a dying brain before passing into the great beyond. The 3 beings surrounded Watson left, right, and center. The one with the glass tube slid it over Bruce's right arm, and it made a vacuum seal. Unable to move his head, he shifted his eyes far over and down to see his immobilized arm enveloped in glass. Unable to retract his arm, to move his hand or wiggle his fingers, he watched the diffuse gas fill the tube and spin in a mini vortex. Nothing happened, or so it seemed. When the gases subsided and the tube cleared, his arm was gone. Bruce shrieked, and his body shook internally. His lungs hyperventilated, and his mind went delirious at the sight of his vanished arm. At the bottom of the tube he saw a lump of pulsing plasma with all the hallmarks of a living organism, yet inexplicable and unrecognizable to Bruce Watson's human mind that this lump just seconds before had been part of his body. The alien being removed the glass tube from Watson's body, leaving a lump of cauterized flesh below the shoulder. It had healed and gave no indications of any recent infliction of trauma to the stump. Bruce wanted to pass out, to eradicate the horror from his mind, but the inquisitive part of his brain remained intact, demanding to see the next step in this macabre process. The being with the missing arm was offered the glass tube of pulsing plasma from the other creature, and placed the tube next to its shoulder. The gases swirled again in a cloudy vortex, and the creature threw back its head in pain or pleasure Watson could not appreciate. The gases subsided, and the alien being removed the tube to reveal a new arm possessed of 3 elongated fingers, dotted with suction cups on their anterior portions, and a thumb with a large suction cup at the tip. It stared at its new arm, tested its mobility, all of the freakish digits movable, and the arm demonstrating full range of motion. Watson cried at them and sobbed from the tremendous personal loss. "Give me back my arm!" The creatures looked at him without emotion, cold dead eyes and narrow expressionless mouths, unaffected by any of the protestations of their hapless victim. Another of them came through the energy barrier, dressed in the same metallic-like uniform. The creature arrived with a normal gait, but then removed a prosthesis and let it fall to the floor of their ship. It had no leg in the biological sense, but Bruce knew that it wanted one, that the prosthesis, no matter how advanced or effective, could never replace the craving for real flesh. even if the flesh came from an alien organism. Two of the aliens, at the direction of the third, removed a much larger glass tube from the centralized pedestal. Bruce knew what to expect. He tried to kick at them when they drew nearer, but his leg would not comply with the instructions given by his mind, his remaining 3 limbs fixed in place by an invisible force beyond the scope of Watson's earthly knowledge. The alien being slid the tube up Watson's left leg. This time he could not look and cast his eyes to the ceiling. The tube lit up and reduced his leg to a flurry of atoms. They settled at the bottom in a large mass of pulsing flesh. Watson sensed no pain but knew what he would find as a suspected result. The creature removed the tube and Watson looked down to the floor, his whole leg gone and the wound cauterized to medical perfection. "Monsters!" he exclaimed. "Why?" The 3 alien beings helped the fourth but ignored Bruce Watson's protestations. He watched the atoms of his missing leg reassembled to constitute a viable working leg on the alien with the prosthetic. It kicked the prosthetic to the side and summoned another alien creature through the energy field. It came through the light and looked straight at Watson. It pointed at him. Bruce studied the being, looking for whatever flaw it sought to be corrected at his expense. It removed part of its face to reveal a gaping hole where half of its head would in theory have belonged, based on visual cues from their alien physiology. In a moment of lucidity, Bruce opined the wound to have its origins from an interstellar war that raged somewhere in the cosmos between 2 alien foes. This alien gave off chills colder than the furthest reaches of the known universe, and Bruce Watson knew he had precious little time. Together, these interstellar creatures removed a large cylindrical glass dome and brought it to Watson's head. They placed the dome over his head and he screamed a stream of profanities at them before taking one deep breath into his lungs. He sensed a seal form around his neck, evacuating all of the air inside the cylinder. He raged at them with burning eyes and realized that evil was not confined to humankind, but it was indeed quite universal.